School District Special Curriculum Committee meeting of the whole board on May 8th. First item on the agenda is introductions and administrative remarks.
Thank you very much. So just to give you a little peek into our agenda for tonight, tonight we're going to take a look at a couple board action items at the beginning, and then we have two presentations this evening. The first one is Concussion Prevention and Management, and the second one is going to be an update on the Adolescent Sleep study. We had to do a little juggling around for some of the coming meetings, so I'm going to give you a preview of what to expect for the rest of the summer. In June, we're going to be looking at the middle school program evaluation part 2. We have some textbook adoptions. Yes. Some textbook adoptions will be coming up in June. Sometimes we do those in May, but we're trying to make room for some other things. And then in June, we're also going to hear from Dr. Kane about the 339 plan, which is the plan our guidance counselors have been working with him on all year regarding college and career readiness. So they will give you an update on where we are with that. So we have pushed the full day kindergarten report to August, which will be very convenient because we'll have our PSSA scores from our first kindergarten class back by then, so that will add a lot to that information. And then in August, we're also going to talk about the Future Ready Index because we will be getting a Future Ready Index dashboard next year, so we'll become familiar with the data and the procedure that goes into that piece. And then I'm also saving a spot for the middle school program review part 3. Since we have two things coming to us in June, I want to make sure that we have time to fully talk about some of those recommendations and whatnot. We're going to get the lion's share done of it in June, but we do want to make sure that we have a placeholder for that. And then I have just a couple responses to some questions from last month. We had several questions around football and helmets and weight classes and things like that. And perfect timing, we have two of our athletic directors here with us tonight. They're going to be doing a presentation together with our athletic trainer. So we'll get lots of information on those topics this evening. The middle school study, as we mentioned, we're going to save those questions until we get to our presentation in June. So we'll talk more about the issues that we focused on during that study when we get to that. Dr. Barczyk is going to answer the question about our use of student data, particularly what's protected as far as what we collect from our students during policy. And then I think Michelle also talked, and they're going to talk in policy about the field trip questions. So, and the last one I had was around the technology fee. So we didn't talk really specifically when we talked about the tech study about how we're going to cover students for whom the technology fee might be a hardship, or students who have multiple children paying the technology fee. We have some general recommendations in place, but we're going to be looking at that specifically together with the high school, making sure that we're covering students, number one, that don't have internet services or access to internet services at home, and students for whom paying the technology fee might be a burden for families that might have multiple students. We'll have some type of a cap there, so that doesn't get up too far into the distance. Thank you very much. Oh, wait, and I want to mention STEAM Camp. Message from Dr. Murray. So our STEAM Camp, as you know, last year it filled up very quickly, and this year isn't any different. So it's July 9th to the 12th and the 16th to the 19th. We have sessions for 3rd to 5th grade and also for 6th to 8th. And both of those sessions are filling up quickly. So if people want to register for that, now is the time. It seems like a long way away, but get your names in and get your reservations made online so you have a spot if you're interested in STEAM Camp. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I want to apologize for the late start of our meeting.
You're not late.
Whoops. All right. I want to apologize to everyone for the late start to our meeting, and I want to offer that if our agendas are so packed, if we need to, the curriculum committee could maybe find a time in July to hold a meeting if we can't get our business done, and it's our top priority. Obviously, student safety, these are high priority items to cover before the school starts. So.
Okay, and we'll make sure that we check in on specifically the things that are time sensitive. Thank you.
Okay, that brings us to public comment. Is there any public comment at this time?
Sherry, Governor's Circle, Newtown Square. I'll confine my comments to agenda item 4.2, Athletic Director's Report on Concussion Prevention and Management. First of all, the number of articles about the significant dangers and harmful effects of concussions, especially the long-term effects faced by children, are staggering. However, the district shouldn't just be concerned about preventing concussions because subconcussive hits are dangerous as well. For example, January 18th, NPR reported on a study published online in Brain, a journal of neurology, that presented the strongest case yet that repetitive hits to the head that aren't concussions, in other words, they don't have any symptoms, do cause CTE. This is a silent injury. The longer you play tackle football and the earlier you start playing, you'll suffer more head hits and put yourself at greater the risk for CTE, Dr. Goldstein says. He was one of the authors. That's what all the evidence in the study was suggesting. He believes student athletes shouldn't play tackle football until high school. Other recent news stories within the last 8 months. Number 2, a New York Times article on September 19th, playing tackle football before 12 is tied to brain problems later. April 2018, ABC News, even a mild head injury increases risk for Parkinson's disease, veteran study shows. And finally, a May 1st, 2018, last week, CBS News report states, a new study published in Annals of Neurology found kids who start playing tackle football before age 12 will, on average, develop cognitive and emotional symptoms associated with the degenerative brain disease CTE, much earlier than those who start later. The study showed kids who began playing tackle football before the age of 12 begin showing cognitive and emotional symptoms at an average of 13 years earlier than those who start after 12. It's concerning because it was such a change, said Dr. Ann McGee of Boston University, the study's lead researcher. Children's brains are rapidly developing between 8 and 12 years old. They're laying down new networks, they're pruning the different connections, they're sort of enhancing their brain, McGee said. Ladies and gentlemen, the evidence is overwhelming and it's not good for tackle football, a sport where boys get knocked down on almost every play. Previous questions I'd like to be addressed today. Will the athletic directors focus on injury prevention and present a comprehensive report about student football helmets that include specifics, dates purchased, detailed descriptions, make, model, year, individual helmet costs, and any independent ratings for concussion mitigation? I was told that regarding helmet, the minutes state that RTSD helmets are professionally inspected and certified annually. They are replaced on a rotating basis. The most recent purchase of football helmets occurred last year. How does that rotation work? Who are the professionals that determine safety, and which athletes get the newer helmets? Number 2, also, will a medical explanation be given for the use of the 115-pound number for middle school football and why it's not better to eliminate tackling altogether for middle school students? Number 3, will today's presentation include detailed information about helmet use in other sports like ice hockey, lacrosse, etc.? Smoking not too long ago was popular and viewed as a social enhancement. Opinions gradually changed because of the dangerous scientific evidence, and smoking has been dramatically reduced in the United States. Football is a very popular and entertaining sport, but the increasing scientific evidence indicates that the very high price of this entertainment is paid for by the brains of young athletes. Board members, administrators, teachers, and parents have a huge responsibility to safeguard young children, and you do this in many ways, many other ways.
Sherry, you're at 4
My last
minutes,
sentence.
4 minutes, 10 seconds.
My last sentence. Just say no to tackling in middle school. Let students make decisions about their long-term health when they are at an appropriate age to understand the long-term consequences of these decisions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sherry. Is there any other public comment?
Roberta Winters, 326 Williams Road in Rosemont. I just wanted to make a comment that I know that in regard to the specific issue about the sleep recommendations that are going to be perhaps preliminary discussed tonight, I want to mention that the League of Women Voters will be more than happy, if needed, to do any forums or focus groups that might be needed to get input from the community about any issues that might be forthcoming. And further, that I know sometimes the issue of traffic has been brought up, and that is an issue that the league was doing a public forum on that was snowed out, which would have included many of the key players around the district with traffic issues and many of those variables that may impact decision making. So I have again contacted the Township Police, with whom we collaborated on that initial effort, and we hope we can resolve a scheduling time when we can do that forum for the public so that we can perhaps look at a holistic picture of the township. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for that kind offer.
Cindy Spurtle, Wayne. I would just like to, since tonight's presentation on the from the athletic directors seems to cover prevention, that maybe the discussion might be changed to whether or not middle school there should be tackle football already. It appears that the department is doing a good job on working on helmet design, prevention, having concussion studies, but maybe after the report and the articles I've read also that it's a discussion that should be had in the Radnor Township School District as to whether or not to continue with it in middle school, which is a whole new discussion. Again, we have on the to be presented as an agenda item for the business meeting. Our agenda items is an approval for another trip, cost to the district of $2,951 for the Future Business Leaders of America. And once again, I'll ask how the decision is reached on what trips to fund and what trips not to fund, or are all trips, student trips funded by the board. And also a report from Dr. McLean on the popularity of STEAM camp. Once again, I'll ask the question, why not STEAM throughout the entire year, adding the A of STEAM to the STEM program that is offered by Radnor, since it appears to be so popular, and it's also other schools offer it. On the sleep study, I know this is just an initial presentation, but some things kind of jumped out at me in the data that was provided for us. The first is the phrase, and it's under the waking up in the morning. 90% of students feel sleepiness is a problem from some to a great extent. That's a big jump. Some, which appears to be little, to a great extent. I would be curious as to how many are close to some of them are bothered, or are all 90 of those 90% bothered. In your further research might be something you'd look into. Also, homework, there is a homework policy, and I tried to go back to check on the high school policy, and if I added up looking at the answers, the lowest was 2 to 4 hours that students spend on homework, and then they don't go to sleep until the homework's done. If I were to add the AP integrated seminar plus honors plus advanced plus college prep homework, it appears that's about 2.5 hours. So the question is, now these are averages, but are the teachers following the homework policy for the students, or are they working more hours on homework, being given more homework hours that may be causing part of this problem? And just a question out of curiosity, Radnor students' sleep deprivation coping mechanisms, 50% of the students report napping. My question is when? During class or after they get home?
Good evening. I have some public comment regarding some sleep presentation. Andrew Foreman. Dear members of the Radnor Township School Board, my name is Andrew Foreman. I'm a local pediatrician and parent of 2 teenagers at Radnor schools. I'm also the president of the Radnor Board of Health. Thank you for taking the time to research and address the important issues of delayed school start times. As you may be aware, the Radnor Township Board of Health approved a resolution in March of 2017 supporting the district shifting to later school start times. The Board of Health recommendation is consistent with the national organizations, including the American Academy of Pediatrics, the American Academy of Family Practice and the American Academy of Sleep Medicine. Numerous studies have confirmed that later school start times is better for both the physical and mental health of adolescent students. Although I'm unable to attend tonight's meeting, I encourage the members of the Radnor Township School Board to approve and implement a later school start time for our middle school and high school students. Sincerely, Andrew Foreman. This is from Kim Kent. I am 100% in support of late school start times. The recommended school start time that is best for teens' health is after 8:30. All research showing that teens need more sleep is critical for a teen's development and health for them not to be sleep deprived. Radnor School District is one of the best ranked and respected school districts in the United States. We should be setting the example and being progressive when it comes to school start times. My family has lived all over the United States. There are states that have successfully had late start dates for times. I imagine that's late start times for decades. The excuse that this is the way it's been is not good enough. The excuse that it negatively impacts sport teams and practice does not work. Radnor School District needs to step up and do what's best for its students. We have lived in a district where elementary schools have had the earliest start times and high schools have the latest. This concept is not new and does not work well. On a personal note, my oldest daughter became sick with pneumonia after the fall sports season. Part of the reason she became so sick is because of lack of sleep. In addition, it took her much longer to recover because she needed more sleep to recover. I could attach dozens of studies and recommendations by the American Academy of Pediatrics and the Center for Disease Control. However, I am aware the district already has this knowledge. So my plea to the Radnor School District School Board is to do what is best for the students' health. It really is that simple. This is from Mary Ann Bells. Dear board members, my husband and I are in 100% support of pushing back RHS start times to 8:30. Our son is a freshman and went through puberty early, and we have seen such a change in his demeanor. He is constantly tired. He prefers to do his homework in the morning, but most of the time he has trouble getting up, so he ends up going in late and missing the bus. Our son had a concussion last year, so we believe that he needs good sleep every day, so we end up driving him almost every day so we can get the most sleep possible. Chris plays several sports so he has long days. We feel that he would be a better student if he had a later start time because he wouldn't be exhausted all the time. We believe that having students driving to and from school would be safer for all concerned. We believe that sleep is crucial during puberty and would benefit all students. Thank you for your service, and please vote to support change in school schedule. Mary Ann and Bob Bells. This is from Julie Schultz. Hello, as a parent of an 8th grader, I want to inquire about the initiative for later high school start times. Unlike many of her middle school friends, my daughter is a morning person and is often up before the alarm in the morning. Even with that, the high school start time will be a challenge for her this fall. Based on all the research that has come out recently, I cannot think of a reason to have our high school begin at such an early hour. While I understand that many obstacles to changing the school start time to 8:30, I really think the obstacles can all be worked through. It will take a lot of effort from a lot of people, but I think our children are worth that. After all, this isn't just an opinion of a few parents. This is based on mountains of scientific research. I look forward to hearing what progress is being made on this initiative. Thank you so much, Julie Schultz. Stacy Mandel. Dear RTSD board members, I regret that I'm likely unable to attend tonight's curriculum meeting in order to show my support in person for later school start times. As someone who used to suffer from insomnia, I obviously feel strongly that the consequences of chronic sleep deprivation are mountains, and particularly so in the formative adolescent years, whereby only 8% get the sleep they need. Cited Journal of Adolescent Health. I support a few different ideas of how to better address sleep concerns for adolescents, but the main one I'd like to express to you today is that it's starting high school later than 8:30 a.m. per the recommendations of the AAP and CDC. In my opinion, that would be the strongest guarantee action steps that the district can take to benefit its students, as it is the only action step that students and families cannot take themselves. Here are other ideas that I hope the district considers in addition to pushing back high school start time. However, the effectiveness of these either rely on the partnership and compliance from teachers, students, and families, and/or other factors. 1, offer more education directly to the students during school time, as well as families around proper sleep hygiene. Specifically, I think it would be helpful to highlight the latest science and technology effect on the brain. For example, there are psychological ways that technology interferes with sleep, and there are also mindfulness apps that can facilitate sleep. Examine or re-examine assigned homework in order to better understand the quality, quantity, and ultimately the benefit-risk ratio. Other mindfulness skills education to students during the school day. Current research shows that mindfulness benefits academic performance and decreases anxiety and depression, documented contributors to stress levels, which affect sleep quality. Thank you for your consideration. Sincerely, Stacy Mandel. Cheryl Parente, Radnor School District Board. I am fully in favor of adjusting Radnor school start times to accommodate the sleep needs of our high school teenagers. I see firsthand the real benefits of having an extra hour to an hour and a half of sleep in my two sons, both of whom attend private school with a school start time of 8:30 a.m. They are well rested, more eager to start the day, and definitely more productive. This is especially true when their sports commitments keep them from starting homework until 8:30/9 o'clock p.m. some nights. I have a 6th grader at Radnor who intends to stay all the way through high school. She is the biggest sleeper of my 3. Waking up for middle school is already a challenge, and I see how important sleep is to her overall mood. I am very hopeful that change is made before she gets to the high school. We've all read the research. A later start time is proven beneficial for our teenagers and will support an overall healthier student, academically and socially and emotionally. Radnor can do this.
We have 5 more.
5 more.
Water. Where's the communications director? We need Got money home.
Julie O'Malley. I am in favor of later start time for the high school. Thank you, Julie. Thank you, Julie.
Fantastic. Right her back. Oh, Con.
This is Robert Slinkard. Please be advised that I am too in support of a later school start time for RHS. Thank you very much, Mary Slinkard. Jennifer Hattersley. Hello. As a parent of a 9th and 6th grader, I would like to express my sincere support for a later start to the school day. My 9th grader is truly exhausted on a regular basis due to her early start time. The evidence seems clear that a later start time would be beneficial to the general health and education of our students. I work in the city and cannot attend this evening's discussion, but wanted to pass along my support of this initiative. Thank you. David Gordon, to the RTSD school board. I am a freshman and 6th grader in RTSD. Please push the high school start time later. There is an abundant evidence that later start times yield better academic results as well as better physical and mental health. Please push aside tradition, work around the logistics, and move the start time later. Giselle Gordon. Dear Radnor Township School Board, I am in favor of later start time for the Radnor High School. Please vote for this at tonight's meeting. Thank you. Any more?
I think there was one from Mr. Gordon.
I read that one.
Okay. And Mrs. Gordon.
I only have.
You read David.
I got that. Right.
Thank you,
Follow
Mr.
up.
Rabarchak. You did go over your 4 minutes.
Not individually.
Good evening, Amy Wishner, 15 Braxton Road, Rosemont. I'm talking about adolescent sleep and later start time. I'm a nurse at the Pennsylvania Chapter American Academy of Pediatrics, and I spend a lot of time working on pediatric overweight and obesity. And there's a strong connection between sleep and hormonal mediation of overweight and obesity. And I wanted to read a couple of things from the National American Academy of Pediatrics policy, which goes back to 2014. So we're almost, it's August of 2014, so we're almost 4 years from this. The evidence strongly implicates earlier school start times before 8:30 a.m. as a key modifiable contributor to insufficient sleep. So although we all agree that there are a variety of reasons why kids are getting insufficient sleep, this, as one of the letters pointed out, this is something we can do something about. Delaying school start times is an effective countermeasure with a wide range of potential benefits with regard to physical and mental health, safety, and academic achievement. And then a little further, so physical, reduced obesity risk, mental, lower rates of depression, health, safety, drowsy driving, and it's interesting that, of course, concussions is on the same agenda because there is a connection, well-documented connection between insufficient sleep and sports-related injuries, including concussions, academic performance, and you're probably also familiar with the data about academic efficiency, that the more rested you are, the more efficient a student you are. So, you know, that certainly comes into it, and general quality of life. So, and the evidence since 2014 has only gotten stronger on all of these issues. So, yes, I certainly hope that, you know, we have our group and the study, and I think certainly the data that is presented about the state of sleep and in Radnor is important, but also you know, this, we need to move ahead on this issue. And I sympathize with the person who says, hey, my kid's in middle school, can you guys, you know, make this happen before she reaches high school? In answer to the question about when do kids nap, having a kid who went through the 5 a.m. Swim team and then had double biology, and he was not a science nerd, that was one of the places that he napped. Unfortunately. And I just wanted to recognize that there are a lot of other people who are here tonight in support of considering and hopefully moving ahead with later school start time for Radnor High School. So I wondered if those people just wanted to stand so the board can be aware of how much support there is on this issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wishner.
One last
turn.
Use the player Karen Pollock, this is short, so to whom it may concern, please start the high school day later. These boys need more sleep. No more, right?
Thank you. Is there any other public comment? Okay,
Right along.
seeing none, we'll move into our agenda items.
Okay, so we'll start out with the board action items. So we have a couple of things that will be appearing on the agenda for the board business meeting. The first one I'll draw your attention to is the...
Lydia, the minutes.
Oh, sorry.
Could we skip this?
Yes, you can.
All right, well, why don't you go ahead and finish and then we'll
Okay.
back to that. Thank you.
All right, just a couple things. So FBLA is going to the national competition in Baltimore, Maryland. So that will be listed on the board business meeting agenda. There are 6 students traveling together with a chaperone from the high school. We also have 2 scholarships, high school scholarships. They're awarded for $1,000 each year. They are managed by the district, so we do need board approval to disperse those funds. The one is the Dreer Scholarship, and the other one is the Crescent Scholarship, so those will both be on the agenda for the board business meeting. And then I just wanted to give you a heads up for the Radnor Education Foundation. They did have their spring grants meeting last night. It does typically require them to also have their executive session to approve some of the larger grants, so we may or may not be seeing some contributions from them this month. If not, we will see them in June. And I think that is it for board action items.
All right, thank you very much. Let's look back now. Committee, actually, well, it was the full board, so does anyone have any comments about the minutes from April? Okay, so they will stand as written, and then let's jump into our items.
So at this point, I would like to invite our 2 athletic directors to join us up at the table. We have Mr. Hahn from the middle school, and then we also have Mike Friel from the high school, and then we have our trainer from Radnor High School, the athletic trainer, Kevin Schneider, who will be joining us as well. Take up the box. Would you like to start by introducing yourselves so everybody knows who's who, and then we'll jump into the PowerPoint presentation?
Sure. Hi, my name's Kevin Schneider. I've been the athletic trainer here now for 14 years.
George, I'm the middle school athletic director.
And Michael Frail, the athletic director at the high school, and this is my 8th year at the high school.
So the way we're going to run our presentation tonight is our athletic directors from each of the buildings are going to take turns talking about the way they handle different things at each building, and then we'll have some time for questions, if you have any follow-up questions, and we'll have a little bit of time to discuss them as well. All right, Michael, did you want to pass things out first, or are you going to do that as we go along?
As we go along.
Okay, great.
Okay, in putting together this presentation, what we decided to do is split it up into 3 categories. One is what happens before the athlete ever steps on the field. The second is what goes on during practice to protect our student athletes, and then in-game situation, what to do.
Currently, we get every one of our helmets recertified each year by Sportsman's, which in turn will give us a reconditioning summarized status report. This report outlines every helmet that's in the program. 2 things can happen to a helmet to get them rejected. They can reach an age of 10 years old, or they can have wear and tear. And we are then, through the status report, giving back which helmets that are coming back to us, and then they are recertified. Every helmet that we get in our program is listed by make, model, year, and once it's returned to us, is stamped for the upcoming football season. I brought a helmet this evening just to show that on the back of this helmet, it tells us that this helmet was purchased in 2012, and then for the purpose of this, it was recertified for the 2017 season. We currently have all of our equipment out for recertification. It's actually due back to us sometime this week. But this was a helmet that was in my office that didn't go out, luckily. But we will get 85 to 90 helmets a year recertified, and then they will send back to me a full report on each of those helmets. And then that's how we determine how many new helmets we'll need, considering how many kids come out for the following year. And the last thing I wanted to point out was that under the 5-star helmet ratings made by Virginia Tech, all of our helmets in our program rate as 5 stars. I brought a copy of that just in case anyone was interested in seeing the Virginia Tech helmet ratings. They list all of the helmets and their cost on them as well. The second piece goes to our training for our coaches. There's a mandatory coaching educational course, Concussion in Sports, which is sponsored by the NFHS, the National Federation State High School Association. This is a course online that's sponsored by NFHS that each one of our coaches take each year. And I brought a copy of what a completion certificate looks like. So every one of our coaches paid to volunteer, take the concussion course online, and return this completion form back to my office. Our students, and Kevin certainly will be a little bit more apt in this department, but our students also take the impact test, which is a computerized assessment tool to help licensed healthcare providers evaluate and manage a suspected concussion. Test results are compared to baseline scores and data scores as part of the assessment of the injury. I'd ask Kevin to put that into a little more layman's terms, but I can tell you that throughout the course of a year, this comes up quite often. A student will come to see Kevin, a parent will come to see Kevin and ask for a copy of his baseline test, and then they take that to the doctor. But I'll let Kevin elaborate on that.
Thanks. So basically every 2 years for contact sports, we do a baseline test. We don't so much use it, especially on our end, as a diagnostic tool, although it can be used in that sense. What we want to make sure before they get back on that field and put themselves in a situation where they can get hit and sustain another concussion, which is obviously become much worse, that they're back to their own personal baseline level. So they'll take that test again before they get back on the field. We've been doing this test for a while now. I'd probably say close to 10 years. It's like a 30-minute test. It tests your memory, your reaction time, and we have that information. Like Mike said, the students always have access to that again. So when they finish the test, they're given a passport code, which you can easily download the app through Impact. Although I usually end up giving, the parent gets in contact with me and I give that baseline test back to them. Say someone's been out of school for a couple of years, they've gone to college, they end up getting a concussion, they can still access that test. They've got a passport that goes right to their email, and they can take that. That's pretty much it for the Impact.
Two more pieces that go along with preseason is that we fit every student with who plays football with their helmet, and everyone is provided a mouth guard. So those are the things that happen all before a student steps on the football field. The one thing that we'll get into is in practice, and you'll notice that the discussion has been from middle school to high school, and there are some differences in between the two programs, and you'll hear what some of those are.
Just an added thing for the middle school as far as preseason goes, we also weigh our students, and we have our teams divided up into a lightweight team and a heavyweight team, and the cutoff is 115 pounds. The question was, why 115 pounds? I think it goes back long before any of us, actually. I can remember when I was in junior high school, us having 3 weight classes in junior high school, and 115 was kind of the average of the 2 lower weight classes that they combined, I think because of numbers dwindling and expense of having 3 football teams. But the 115 seems to be a good weight, especially for middle school. A lot of our kids are small. We have bigger numbers on the 115-pound team than we do in the unlimited weight team. We have boys as light as 75 pounds playing football. So it seems to be a good cutoff point for our middle school. In terms of in practice, the coaches are super in teaching and teaching the tackling techniques to avoid getting your head knocked. And that's the big thing they stress in the middle school, is just teaching, teaching, teaching. We purchased these for next year. It's a cap that goes over the helmet. It just snaps onto the face mask and velcros on the back to reduce impact. If there is a shot taken. But again, we teach not to use your head, but inevitably something's going to happen. You're going to hit a head somewhere along the line. So this is to reduce that impact in practice. We have them for all of our players to wear during the practice time, and then they come off for the games. It's advertised, I don't know how research-based it is, but it's advertised to reduce the impact to the brain by 30%. The other thing that happens is we minimize how much hitting takes place in practice. If you remember back in the old days, there were drills where they just hammered one another. That does not take place anymore. Everything is just teaching. They walk through plays, they'll run plays without the defense in front of them. They'll run defense is just talking about positions instead of having somebody come out and taking a shot during the practice. The only actual hitting that takes place is the teaching of tackling, and that is left to a minimum, actually. And I think as Mike talks about practice, you'll find out in high school they don't even hit. But we have to in middle school just because it is their first experience with learning how to tackle. We also have access to the trainer because we practice at the high school. Kevin is there. If we run into any problems during practice, he'll bring his card over to our field and help us out with anything that we have going on.
So just to add for the high school, this coming fall will be our 5th year utilizing the Hawk tackling system. And this is a rugby-style tackling system which allows for students to tackle with their heads to the side. It was introduced by Pete Carroll at the Seattle Seahawks, and we've bought into it 100%. And then to that end, we really don't hit in practice, and we do not tackle in practice. We do not bring anyone to the ground. If you would come up and watch a high school practice on Monday while the JV game's going on, our varsity team is lifting, conditioning, and watching film. On Tuesday they do install of their offense. On Wednesday they do install of their defense. On Thursday they do a walkthrough, and Friday night they play football. I played football 20 years ago. It started going that way. I coached football for 10 years. It really was that way, and now it is just how the week is designed, that they play once a week. So our contact is minimal at practice. We call it thud, which means we can hit shoulder pads. We are not allowed to bring a player down to the ground and tackle them while we're at practice. That has been a huge difference in football from 15, 20 years ago to the way you prepare at this level. The other piece to it is football is unique in that they only play once a week, and there's a lot of time spent in the classroom and on the field learning different schemes as it goes along. Obviously at the high school, we are extremely fortunate to have Kevin there every single day. Kevin and I were just talking in the hallway. This is his 14th year there. He knows every kid that comes through the training room. And I was a head lacrosse coach for 8 years, and we had a different trainer every year I was there. And it was troublesome because we didn't get to know the people. I think we're very fortunate here at Radnor to have Kevin and his expertise and his years. And then the one other big difference would be that on Friday nights we have a physician on staff from Rothman at all of our home and away games. I'm sorry, home games. And then the other team supplies one for the away games. So our final piece would be the in-game prevention. And they go back to a couple of things. We have our trainer, we have our physician available, and then Kevin steps in when something would or could go wrong.
The other thing I would add to in-games before Kevin speaks about his piece is the officials are very aware of everything as well. They will make sure every athlete has a mouth guard in, their helmet is strapped on tight, that chin strap's not dangling anywhere, the helmet's not loose. So they're very aware of everything that's going on safety-wise as well.
So I just want to talk a little bit about the management. So, I mean, inevitably, someone does get a concussion. Like Mike said, there's definitely been a reduction. I mean, being here 14 years, we don't get concussions during practice rarely anymore. It's usually just some random thing where someone, maybe doesn't have their helmet on the sideline and someone's kicking the ball and they get hit, something like that. But it's usually not going to happen during a structured practice. It occasionally will, but so basically when someone does have any signs of concussion, I just wanted to kind of go through with you the process of what we do. I do a thorough evaluation with them. That usually takes about a half an hour. After that, I consult with the parents, I talk with them, I answer all the questions, because I know that there's always a lot of questions with concussions. It's scary, and if you haven't dealt with it before, you really want to know what's going on. So I always make myself available to the parents after that. They have my cell phone number. Any questions at all, they can contact me. I give them stuff to look out for if you're worried about anything outside of a concussion. I also, at that time, I would email the guidance counselor and our school nurse. So they're aware, because obviously that person, if they have a suspected concussion, they're not going to be in the gym. Also on the academic side, if they're having issues being in school, I try to give the guidance counselor and the student kind of coping mechanisms for them. One of those would be if they're in class, we tell them, if they're looking up at the board and they're starting to get a headache, they can lay their head down, close their eyes, they can still listen, but they're not getting that visual stimulus, which can sometimes trigger those effects. Other ways is for them to just go down to the nurse's office, lay down for a little bit, and at that point, if it's still not getting better, I usually suggest that they go home for the rest of the day. So after that, I answer all the questions. Parents, I provide that to the guidance counselor or the school nurse. At that point, we set up an appointment with the doctor. If they see a Rothman doctor, it just works out easier because our team doctor, Dr. Stash, who's at all the football games, he is a non-operative sports medicine doctor. He deals with concussions all the time. He's kind of the Southeast PA concussion guy for Rothman. So we always try to get them in with that doctor. I talk with him on a daily basis. Once that's set up, the student checks in with me each day that they're in school. We monitor symptoms. Once they're feeling better, we have them take that impact test again, make sure that they're back to that baseline level. And at that point, symptoms have resolved, that impact test looks good, we start a graded return to play. So each day they increase their activity, they come and see me, we go through all their symptoms, they rate if they have any symptoms or not. They do that before and after each step of that return to play. I think Mike might have. Yes. So we have forms, including the form that I send out to the parents with everything to look out for. We have the forms of the return to play and how each step they have to successfully go through that without having a return of symptoms. In order to progress to the next step, you can't progress a step within 24 hours. So each can't go, basically you go through one step one day, you check in again, and you go from there until they're fully back in the field.
What do you do during a football game? Because knowing that having a son who played and actually did use his, Ricky's been 10 years since or 8 years since he's played. But what do you do during a football game? Because I know those kids don't want to indicate that they're not feeling well.
We really just try to keep our eyes on the field the whole time. Someone is always keeping their eyes on the field. I also have athletic training students from Eastern that are helping me on the sideline, so they can kind of take care of the small things like getting ice bags or stretching someone.
But if they look like if you think that they've been involved in
yes.
a head-to-head or some sort of play
yes.
that may have resulted, then what do you do?
So if someone takes a big hit to the head and they're either down on the ground, they don't hop right back up, or if they stagger coming off the sidelines, we'll always go and check in with that player. The team doctor is, on the sideline for that.
So that person is pulled from the game for a period of time, and someone is looking at them, but it's not usually you, right? Because you're usually helping with the other.
Well, if it's at the JV or freshman level, then it would be me. So what I'm looking for is we have a couple quick screens that we do. I do what's called a vestibular ocular assessment, which there's a whole bunch of different eye tests that we do. We look at tracking to make sure that pupils are tracking the right way, that they're not slowing down, or they're able to go along the path that we're asking them to go. Sometimes as well we'll do balancing. So I might ask them to walk heel to toe along a line in the field, and as they're doing that, count off by sevens. So they're using their brain, they're trying to concentrate at the same time. If there's any time, even if, you know, we're not seeing any symptoms, if I see someone stagger off the field, they're not going back into that game, even if, you know, they're telling me they're completely fine.
Okay,
If
so
I
then
see
they
it-
go through this whole 24-hour
Correct.
concussion watch process.
And once that evaluation starts, the physician is the person that makes the final clearance, so they see the physician no matter what.
Thank you.
So I wasn't sure if you had completed your presentation, if you wanted questions in the middle, or would you like us to hold the questions to the end, or where?
I just have one more.
Okay.
I just was going to add that for the 16 football season and the 17 football season, with approximately 85 students from 9th grade to 12th grade, we've had 5 concussions in football over 2 seasons. So we know that our numbers are down and we're doing the right thing. And to just answer the question on when a kid takes a big hit, they're not going back in. They can be angry, their parents can come out of the stands, we've had it. They're not going back in until they see a doctor.
Great.
All right, thank you very much. This was incredibly informative. I had really not that much information about this, not having ever parented a football player. So are there questions from fellow board members?
So how, do you want to just go like around the table? How do you want to do that? Just
Well, who
Mike,
has
do you want to hand
questions
out the
first?
handouts?
Sure.
That would be good.
why actually?
You have some, you have some, you have some.
No, I'm done.
Okay, everybody does. So let's go. Should we start?
Start with the new guy.
Yeah, the new guy over
there. Did you have a comment?
Oh, good. Mike answered it already.
So this is more of a comment than a question. I played football for 6 years. I've been a Big Ten football fan since for as long as I can remember. But that being said, I would have to think very hard about whether or not I'd let my son play football any earlier than high school. Now, every parent can make that decision for themselves, but I would say based on the science, I would be glad to see high school football be phasing out over the next 15 to 20 years, frankly, based on the scientific data. A helmet and that pad, by the way, is not scientifically proven to do anything, but just so everyone knows. And there's a link to a video I suggest in our materials. Take a look at that animation of the brain sloshing around within the skull. When Walter Camp came up with the sport of football at, I believe it was at Yale University 100-something years ago, it was a new game, and it was an adaptation of rugby. So what I'm saying is that there was a time when we didn't have football, and I foresee a time in the future when there won't be football anymore. It causes a lot of harm to young brains and adult brains, and I think that we should think hard about how this is very long term, how our athletic program can continue to do what we are doing, which I think is very good, to minimize brain injury, but to also consider, let's say, expanding sports where the concussion rate is a fraction of what it is for football. So lacrosse, soccer, those sports still, you can still have brain injuries in those sports, but the concussion rate is a fraction of what it is.
I think lacrosse actually has a pretty high concussion rate. You might want to check those
No,
stats.
I know the stats. It's a fraction. It's not even close. So, but thank you very much for the presentation. Again, I'm someone who has a very long relationship with football. I love the game, but I also know that science, both with the sleep issue and with this issue, we're seeing that science is pushing us to reform what we do, and I think that's positive. Thank you.
I actually had a question that echoes one of the public comments and kind of takes it along another step. I know that Ms. Sherry brought up a lot of arguments about tackle football before the age of 12. I know the middle school, we don't start until 7th grade, so those kids are 12 or 13 when they start. And I guess my question is there even a league for non-tackle football at the middle school level? And is that something that we've considered participating in? I'm not trying to bring up new business, just kind of asking the question generally, is that even an option?
Yeah, there's no league in terms of school-sponsored leagues. There is an outside league that Mike can speak to because he has some stats on that.
The Radnor Young Raiders have 200 kids playing flag football in that age bracket, and then they graduate to tackle football. But I asked specifically how many kids they have playing. They have 200 playing flag at this time.
And is that at the middle school level, or is that really more elementary school? Because I know I've seen little boys out there playing football.
I would say you're correct. It's elementary, and then as they get a little older, they're tackling, probably by the 5th grade.
And you are correct about the middle school. We start in 7th grade, so our athletes are 12, 13, 14 years old.
Do we keep any, and I know it's harder to track, do we keep any record of not the full concussions, but kind of the subconcussive hits that have kind of a longer term effect as well?
I mean, I don't have anything like that. That's, you know, I think you're speaking about things down the line, in regards to CTE, is that?
Yeah, I heard the same NPR report.
Yeah, no, I mean, we're all hearing it now. That's obviously, there's new science coming out every day, and you're finding out a lot more about that. I'm not sure how we could even document that type of thing, because these are a lot of these things are repetitive, small hits. I don't have an answer for how you would document that at this point.
Okay, thanks.
Can I add something just extremely quickly? You can't really see a concussion on an MRI or a CT scan. You have to go by the symptoms that an individual presents. I just want to throw that out there. So I played on defensive and offensive line. Every single play we're hitting heads, practically. So then that's another issue of position. And there's a lot of variables here.
Yeah, and come back to the ambulance, Vice Chair. Please, that's protocol here. You can go ahead, you can go.
Hi, I'm blown away by the breadth of everything that you're doing in this program. I had no idea. I'm curious though, are there standards in school standards, guidelines? Like, is there a program upon which against which you can measure your program? Yes. I mean, are there any
protocols out there
right.
that you need to follow for concussions?
As far as management goes, we have been following. We follow pretty much the gold standard of that return to play. Basically, that step-by-step advancement through it. We've had that implemented for a while now, and that is pretty much the gold standard everywhere.
So I just wanted to mention that there was a study conducted by Northwestern University recently, and I thought it was very striking that they discovered that between 2010 and 2015, female soccer players faced an even higher risk of concussion than footballers did. And boys baseball and girls volleyball showed the biggest jump in concussion rates. And in all sports played by both sexes, girls experience greater rates of concussions than their male counterparts playing the same sport. So my lens in hearing this whole presentation is not just through football, it's through all sports. And so when I ask the questions, I'm sort of thinking it through that lens, and I just wanted to mention that ahead of time. You said that you do pre-concussion baseline testing.
but I didn't see that as one of the preventative measures in the presentation. Is that something that you do for all athletes, given that concussions show an incidence beyond just football? And is that sort of a routine preseason kind of thing, establish the baseline?
We do for all contact sports. So that gets done like in the fall, in the preseason. You know, we get that done as soon as the teams are formed, as soon as we can. Sorry, was there another question with that?
No, you mentioned baseline testing, and I assumed that that would be considered a preventative measure, so I didn't see it. So I just wanted to know, is that something that is done for all student athletes so that you have that baseline across the board?
So just, I'm sorry if we missed that. For the contact sports, we would consider girls soccer a contact sport, so they all get that done.
Okay.
And how that's done is once the teams are decided, they book a computer lab, and Kevin gives it to everyone who is in turn needs it. So if they've gotten it as a 9th grader, they don't need to do it again as a 10th grader, and then he catches back up with them as an 11th grader. But yes, and we're very aware that this is not just a football issue. We've been fortunate on say the girls soccer side, but I think nationally girls soccer is on the rise in concussions, and we're very aware of that. So while most of this was focused on football, we do keep track of all of our numbers across all sports.
So while you've seen a decrease in football, are you seeing an increase in other sports? And do you find that, as per the studies, that there's a greater incidence of concussions in other sports besides football here in Radnor?
I'll just say, from my own opinion, I think we're becoming well more aware of it. I think 20 years ago, if you got knocked down by a pitch, no one assumed you got a concussion. And now you are going to see the trainer. And now we're getting that diagnosed right away. I know I grew up playing Little League Baseball, and you got plugged, you just went to first base. There wasn't that awareness of, he just got hit in the head. So I think across the board, you know, Kevin's at a girls' soccer game just like he's at a boys' football game in the afternoon looking for the same exact things.
Okay. And one other thing I wanted to mention in terms of prevention, because I see it actually, we have a board policy that's called Safety in Youth Sports. And one of the things that is a guideline is information to athletes and families, where they have to, I think, read something in the beginning of the year. I know other schools have this. They read information materials and they have to sign off and send it back in. So is that something, a practice that's still in place across all of these sports? So the parents can also be a part of the preventative mechanism?
Yes, that takes place when they are about to take the impact testing. That all goes home and comes back signed.
Okay. So, thank you all for this information. It's interesting. My focus is, it's interesting how we have all have our different prisms through which we look at this. Interesting that concussions, frequently occur from sports, contact sports. However, the healing of concussions actually needs to take place from rest, sleep, not excessive TV time, not excessive computer time, not taxing the brain. Interestingly, not in the contact arena. So this conversation has been really informative tonight in terms of what we do and don't do in terms of letting them re-enter the contact sport. But the fact of the matter is that the way that the brain heals is to take a break. And so the piece that's missing from all of this, and I'm saying this as a parent who had a child go through a very severe concussion twice. The healing actually is we need to closely link this to the academics. We don't really have a good protocol. We don't really have any set protocol that requires teachers to not assign homework, to postpone testing, to not pile on, a continual workload. It's anecdotally at the high school, and I can only speak at the high school, anecdotally at the high school, some teachers are very understanding of this, some teachers are not understanding of this. And so I'm gonna kind of punt this back to the administration and the curriculum committee to say that in terms of the true healing from a concussion, I think that you're doing everything you can do as sports, as athletic directors and as an athletic trainer to educate families, to protect our children, and all of that, and I think that's great. We probably need to take the next step of when a child does have a concussion, what are we doing to help that child heal? And their schoolwork is actually, or the reduction of it is actually a pretty critical component. That's not really a comment to you guys. It's going to require it requires a joint look. And then interestingly, there are children who get concussions not related to sports injuries. They can happen from a car accident. They can happen at, anywhere. Goofing around outside on the weekend, playing on their skateboards. So it doesn't really change. One of the things that Amy pulled out the policy about safety in youth sports, one of the things that I realized this year is that we don't really have what I would call a concussion policy or concussion protocol. And so this is a good conversation for us to have because it's that's the piece that's going to allow the child's brain to heal.
Can I just mention something, Susan, that actually the purpose of this policy, as you were speaking, I thought to myself, to set forth guidelines for the evaluation, management, and response to head injuries and concussions in student athletes. So I was kind of surprised that while the title seems broad, safety in youth sports, the purpose is specific to head injuries and concussions.
Well, and to athletes, and as I said, so I guess my question to you, and you may not know this today, which is fine, if we would look at the percentage of all students up at the high school who are involved in one type or another of contact sport, is it 40%, 60%? I don't know the percentage. It kind of causes me to wonder if we shouldn't be just at least considering the option of doing a baseline for all high school students, so that if they were to get a concussion along the way, unrelated to sports, we would be able to accurately help the family or help them, figure out what the school workload needs to be while the student heals. It's pretty devastating to watch a growing brain go through the process of healing and trying to manage their school workload. Because as I said, that's really where the healing takes place. It's not actually about, going back into the sport too soon will certainly predispose them to devastating injury. But the healing comes from, and actually if you read the Rothman Institute form that you sent us, it actually says limit or exclude computer work, that you have to limit schoolwork if symptomatic, take breaks to control the symptoms. That's not related to the sport, that's related to academics. So probably at some point should be taking a look at that as well.
Well, and I just wanted to mention two things. We're trying not to be repetitive tonight, but I do have a copy of the handout that we had from October 17th when we collected some written information on concussions and cited things like policy 240 and whatnot, and also provided the link to the parent resources on concussion that are part of that policy. So I can give you a copy of that, but I do also want to mention, and I don't know how much contact that the athletic directors would have with this, but we do have students who have accommodations based on concussions. We have students who've been excused from standardized testing. We have students who've been on modified homework. And like you said, those concussions don't necessarily occur on the football field. We had a student who, walked into a door and got a concussion and, was excused from the PSSAs and had some other accommodations put in place as well. So just because it's not specifically part of the protocol on a football field doesn't mean that those things aren't addressed on a student-by-student basis based on what they need.
And if I may comment as well, the other hat that I wear is as a middle school math teacher. And when we do have a student with a concussion, we do get a list from the guidance counselor of what they can and what they cannot do as far as class goes. And oftentimes it's limit homework, don't take any tests, and it's usually for a couple of weeks.
That's my point. It can take 6. That's the problem, and I just mean this, and so that's the problem. It can take 6 weeks, and so we need to take a deeper look at a more systemic approach to this. We do, sincerely.
Right. I don't think it's something that's written by the counselor. I think it's a recommendation from their pediatrician to follow. The other thing I'd like to comment on, and I hope I'm not overstepping my bounds, I would love to see the impact test given to every 7th grader during a health class.
There you go.
And then if it has to happen every 2 years, do it again in ninth grade. And that way they'll all be covered. Because in talking to our counselors and our nurse, the majority of middle school concussions have nothing to do with sports.
Right, exactly.
You know, they're horsing around on the weekend with their brother, or
Right.
you know, run into a pole because they don't want
Yeah.
to yell or king their phone. You know,
Yeah,
so
exactly.
I think it would be beneficial to have all the students.
Right.
Mr. Miller?
I'm really impressed with what you all go through for the football program now, because I played for Radnor football for 6 years. And we didn't have anything like that. You know, I mean, we tested the helmets one time. A guy, ball coach, you know, dropped a baseball bat. It was not Charlie Hersey, my high school. So it's really impressive to see what you all go through now, having gone through it back then. You know, also having played Radnor lacrosse for a number of years. I mean, that was the sport that was, you know, that's where the concussions happened a lot. I mean, I gave a bunch and got a bunch, so I played defense. But and then practicing in the gym.
That's what happened to you.
That was terrible. Yeah. But I mean, and like you said, just horsing around. One time I did get a concussion in my school was during swim season. Somebody opened the door into my face because they went out. They came out the end door. You know, so I mean, it's just random on swim season. You know, get concussions done that. But do you keep track and have numbers of all the other sports? Like, you know, do you know how many girls get concussions from girls soccer, like the boys and girls lacrosse, or you know, boys soccer and all that with all the heading that's going on? You know, and then when two guys go up to get headings, I play soccer now. You know, two 50-year-olds getting a concussion because they knocked their head. So do you have numbers like that? Do you provide us later? I mean, now it's top of your head.
We do have those numbers.
And like, I mean, just do the clubs have to report too? Like ice hockey is a club sport, not a school sport, but you know, youth ice hockey is, I mean, I don't know if you ever watched the major juniors on TV, but that's the most brutal headshots in all of ice hockey.
Kevin has all of those numbers, and we'd be happy to provide them for you. If an ice hockey player were to get an injury at night, he would come and see Kevin the next day.
Thank you.
Mr. Madden? Oh, I'm sorry.
Good. I go back to Radnor football. Jules Prevost was my coach. So you can imagine how long ago that was. And I can remember the time myself being carried out on a stretcher and being put on the sideline, and the football coach waking me up to send me back in. Okay? So we've come a long, long way here. And I guess what I would like, before you guys go, is the credentials. Like, for instance, you're a certified trainer. I'd like to, so that the public can understand the credentials that you have and the background that you have. So you're just not someone like me. When my son was knocked out, I would always put up two fingers and say, how many fingers do I have on my hand? So he would have to say 4.
Right. Okay. So, I mean, to be an athletic trainer, you have to graduate from a certified program, obviously. I have a master's degree in athletic training. You have to sit down and take a test to be certified. We have to do continuing education just like everyone else every few years. And I'm also licensed in Pennsylvania to practice athletic training.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, seeing no other questions, I want to thank you so much. I hope this didn't feel like we were grilling you. We're just really welcome. We really appreciate you sharing all this information with us. It's very important.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we are running very late. Do we want to continue? Do we have time to do justice to our sleep study?
I think we get a good start on it.
Okay.
Are you okay with that?
Okay, everybody good with that?
We have to set.
No, 6:30.
6:30.
Oh, sorry.
Well, we'll keep going if everybody's good with that. Yep. Okay.
With Mr. Stengel. That's why you didn't rush so long, right?
Sorry.
It's okay. All right, we're all going to take a nap now. So thank you for having us tonight, and just to be able to share out where we are in this process in regards to our adolescent sleep and school start time study. So I will not go in depth, but you have the information there in front of you. But on the first slide, Mr. Bachelor, would you mind? We lost. On the first slide is basically just an overview of the school start time background and how we came to this. We identified that chronic adolescent sleep loss is a concerning health issue. Mr. Bachelor, along with the rest of the administration, designated this as a priority project. And then so we made a commitment to study and an eventual recommendation. On the next slide, we have 3 guiding principles or purposes that we were looking at. It's understanding and educating the community, evaluating the impact on Radnor, and then presenting a report with a recommendation. So currently the group is on bullet 3 and working towards a recommendation. We're exploring, as you'll see later in the presentation, we are exploring different various scenarios along with the committee. On the next slide, we started out in gathering a committee of asking these 3 essential questions that were, what do you think would be benefit of a later school start time? What are the concerns? And any general comments that you would like to have the committee address. We were very popular at that time. We had close to 500 responses from community members, and that was from students, parents, teachers, administrators, and also community constituents. Of those 500, we had 100 of the respondents who were interested in being on the committee. From the 100, we chose 36. We went through a pretty strategic approach in regards to trying to get a well-balanced group of those who had no interest in changing school start time, to those wanting to change school start time, to those who were just saying, we have no idea what you're talking about and we really want to learn more about this. As you can see, it's made up of that mix of individuals, of students, parents, guardians, teachers, administrators, and community representatives. On the next few slides, I won't take much time, but you can see there's the number of students we have currently with us. We have a number of parents, and on the next slide, community members and RTSD employees. I have to say, of this group, we have had a mix of individuals who have come to each meeting. It hasn't been every one of these individuals every time, but if they're listed, they contributed to the study and to their input of what the eventual recommendation should be. As we move forward, the summary of events. So far we have met 2, 4, 6, 8, 9 times. Yesterday was our most recent meeting, and as part of that process, we've been on the website, putting on the website updates to the progress of each meeting, along with looking at different research and resources for our committee members as well as the general public to explore as we study this topic, and then making the curriculum meeting presentations just to provide some updates. So, as part of objective 1, or our guiding principle 1, in regards to educating the public, we hosted Dr. Wendy Troxel, who spoke to a group of administrators, school board members, our committee members, and so on. We also invited other administrators and staff from other districts at that time to come to the afternoon presentation. And then we had an evening presentation for parents and guardians, as well as community representatives, and then we had a good showing of constituents from the local college and universities who were there. Finally, we had a presentation to our students in grades 9 through 12 on that 2 days later, and from that we followed the presentation with a survey that was administered to all our students in their English classes at the high school. Even though the survey was up to 72 questions, I believe, it only took them 10 to 15 minutes to complete the survey. So we made it so it was efficient, but getting the information that we needed in order to develop the needs of our students. Both presentations are now posted on our website. You can go there and click on the link and watch those presentations if you were unable to attend. The next series of slides get into our survey results. And basically, this was to meet objective 2 in regards to understanding the impact on Radnor. And again, I'm not going to read each piece of this for the consideration of time, but as you can see, as you read through the data, it's pretty telling in regards to the students that the 8:30, that 8 to 8:30 time is the kind of natural wake up for them. They're getting to bed, and generally between 10 and 11 p.m. Our students are not naturally waking up in the mornings during the school day. They are depending on an alarm, a phone alarm, or a parent waking them up. They are feeling that sleepiness throughout the day in many ways. As it was indicated during the public comment, homework tends to be the highest reason, tendency of why our students are getting to bed at a later time. Work is not really an issue within our community. Overall, about a quarter of our students work, and of those, 46% of them work 5 hours or less a week. So it's more the enjoyment, getting some fun money in their pocket, and that really wasn't the impact in that essence. But our organized sports and clubs, this was kind of a nice thing to see, though. It's nice to see how many of our students are participating in clubs and extracurricular activities and athletics. And which of them, a lot of them stated that, as you can see from this, that 66% of them are participating in the afternoon or 50% on the school nights, which again, keeping that in mind that they're doing their homework for anywhere to 2 to 4 hours of homework after they're done with their extracurricular activities, which takes them to that natural circadian rhythm of getting to bed at 11 o'clock or later. You can see the technology that they self-reported, 88% of them having a cell phone in their bedroom, not many having a TV, which is nice to see. And I thought this was interesting that 50% turn off every device. But the one thing we talked about as part of our group was, I don't think that students see their phone as turning it down. It's the alarm clock for them, so it's still on. So whether it's airplane mode or whatever, but again, shutting down the device 50% as compared to having 88% of them having it in their bedroom. As you go on, you'll see the sleep deprivation coping mechanisms. The 50% of students napping to some or great extent on school days. And that was a combination, that's why it says that some to great extent, but where 53% of our students report consuming caffeinated beverages, which we were, again, pleased to not see it so high. I mean, half is still a good number out of the 850 students, approximately 850 students that reported, but it's good to see that it was not higher than that 53%. And then you can see the Radnor student sleep needs, that 95% of our students are not naturally waking up in the mornings, as I said. They're feeling sleepiness, their sleep quality, 35% of our students consider themselves a poor sleeper, whereas 46% stayed up at 3 a.m. or later at least once or twice within the week. And 6% had a good night's sleep within the last 2 weeks of it being administered the survey. So it's interesting to see what the student sleep patterns are. And generally what it told us was they are going to bed at 11 o'clock or later, and they are feeling that need for additional sleep. So as you can see, 23% believe they get enough sleep, whereas 75% believe that they get too little sleep. And again, the last piece of the survey that we looked at was the functionality of their mood, whether they're arriving late to class, or feeling too tired, feeling unhappy, sad, or depressed. So that social emotional component, and knowing that there is some anxiousness or nervousness because they're not getting the sleep that is required. The next slide is a standalone slide only because it kind of speaks to our students and what they reported out, that they would prefer to see an 8 o'clock or later start time. And of those 85% that reported that, 61% of them reported they would like to see it 8:30 or later. So as you look through our next steps, as I said, we're looking towards our guiding principle number 3 of making a recommendation. of leaning that way. So currently the committee is in meeting to look at the various scenarios that are available. No change to school start time, a 30-minute change, a 60-minute change, and a 90-minute change. So at this time, really instrumental that our high school staff, Mr. Bechtel, along with Mr. Stango, and the guidance counselors, along with our transportation director, Mr. Hearn, are all looking at the schedules of the Bell schedule as well as the transportation schedules. And Mr. Friel is, of course, looking at the sports schedules and how they would be affected. So the possible implications, obviously, we know that they're there, but transportation, athletics, the extracurricular activities, the beginning any times for all our schools, the traffic patterns. And speaking to the traffic patterns, I have made contact with an individual with the Penn study already, because they did a study on King of Prussia Road, so I wanted to see if any of that information would be valuable in understanding what the impact would be at the times of the day if we were to make a change in start time. And then obviously the parent guardian and the staffing schedules. The outcomes that would be the potential outcomes we would be looking for on the next page, if a change, and if you can see is larger font and in bold, because no decisions have been made, but if we were to change school start times, the committee would reconvene 1 year after the change has been implemented and review these are the broader general aspects of the outcomes. They will be more defined as we go further into the study, but you know, the ability to participate more alert in school, the reduction in absentee and tardyism, athletic performance, physical and well-being, the social emotional component, the athletic injuries, the negative sleep compensatory behaviors, and so on. So again, those are overarching. We would get more defined as we move forward. And again, no recommendations have been made to this point, but we are getting closer. The committee has really done a nice job, and I would say the conversations have been very robust, very truthful, and open in regards to the conversation back and forth of playing devil's advocate to, if this happens, what would happen if this would occur, and how would we address that? So it's nice to have that conversation and making that progress. So our next steps basically are to continue over the next couple of weeks in making those scenarios become available and looking deeper into them to understand how it would affect Radnor Township School District. So with that, I think I captured it all in a short amount of time.
Wow, thank you very much. You did go through that quickly, so I hope you got to share with us everything you needed to say. How do you?
I definitely have questions.
Okay, so just how many people have questions, first of all?
I just have one. I have one.
Yeah. Okay, so should we go around again this time?
Start with seniority.
We started over here last time.
Yeah.
Start on this side. Yeah, go ahead, Mike. We're gonna force you.
I usually bounce off with your question. I'm gonna ask I call it the get off my lawn question, because I get it from people that they're like, I had to get up early. Why shouldn't that? Like that. I mean, literally, I get that from people. You'd be surprised. And that's why I call it the get off my lawn question, because it's like usually from older folks. I mean, who have kids at the school, but it's like, really? I mean, what is one of those answers to that? And the traffic thing?
I think a lot of it comes down to the science. And so the science is saying what's best for our kids, and you know, sometimes we have to change the way we do things to accommodate new information that we have. And so I think that's why looking at this is a valuable study. So that would be my response.
And part of their answer to that would be, I'm not saying that I get the question from people. It's also, well, we have to get up for work. You know, we're just teaching them, you know, that in college, you know, you may have an 8 o'clock class, or, you know, corporate world, like, you know, if the day starts at 8:39, or one of my friends works to the 5th, he's got to be there at 7:30, you know.
Again, some of that
training them.
Yeah, it comes back specifically to the science as well on circadian rhythm and adolescents' time, their sleep-wake cycle that does change. So as they get older, they are, you know, more easily able to get up early and so on. So.
And on the traffic thing.
And I'm just learning all of this.
Yeah. Yeah, because I can tell you also, my kids have 2 completely different circadian rhythms, and then, you know, my wife and I are completely different also. But on the traffic, it's not just Penn. it's, because I work just on the other side of the Blue Route from here, so it's not just Penn, you know, that whole Blue Route interchange area, traffic is a nightmare at that time. So if we did the 8:30, it would just be like, you know, right in the middle of that. So I know Radnor has done traffic studies on the Wazoo before they blew Blue Route up till currently. So maybe you should contact
Chris
them.
Flanagan is also
Yeah.
going to provide us with some additional information. But with the University of Penn State, we were interested in that King of Prussia Road area
yeah.
for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah,
especially
that study's outdated, and it was done before all of the construction up in King of Prussia, where all that traffic is now coming down through that part of the community. So I would encourage an updated study.
Well, Chris Flanagan has all the numbers, and then I can't remember the lady's name that has it.
And just to clarify, one of the things that we did going into this study was when we met with the committee, right off the bat was, we didn't want to rehash the science of this and the research. Basically, what we came down to was the research is there. I mean, and it's solid. And we weren't really going to question that. It was more of, that's why we had those 3 guiding principles, and especially making sure we're all educated and to understand that impact on Radnor School District itself.
Thank you so much. So before I ask my question, I just want to check. Andrea, do you have a question since we're going left to right? Okay, all right, thank you. So I'm largely in support of this, although I do acknowledge that there's some hurdles. You know, I am moved by the science. But my question is, knowing that that's my perspective, I am really curious to hear what proactive steps we are taking to reach out to the community of people who would be potentially impacted by this, but not particularly paying attention. So I think that the 500 respondents, and then the 100 people who were willing to be involved, and the 36 who ultimately selected, I'm so appreciative of their dedication, and they're educated about this, and they're looking out for their kids. We need to make sure that we're reaching out to the people who are not at all paying attention to this conversation. And I am quite confident that there's probably a large population within our school district who are not really completely focused on this. And, you know, the time to make sure that their thoughts, I mean, you would think everybody would be paying attention, but everybody gets busy. So I would just ask us, if you haven't already done, what very proactive steps are you taking to make sure we include the people who would be, you know, what did you call it, the get off my lawn, so that we're not taken aback if you were to make a decision to try this, or make a decision of some sort, and you know, we're all of a sudden unexpectedly, you know, hit with an onslaught of resistance. You know, they always say communication and education is the key to any really, you know, important, successful initiative. So that is most especially the case here, I would say. That's really it.
And just to jump in on that, I think that's an excellent point. The committee was tasked, and part of the task of the committee was we're not looking for a change for the fall. So there is the recommendations that are looking to be developed are not looking to be implemented for the fall. Now, realizing that, you know, synergy happens and different things happen. I mean, the one thing I can guarantee is that if we don't do anything, that recommendation we will accept for the fall, because we're going to have the same start time that we have. But there needs to be time. If there is recommendation to make a change, there needs to be time, because it's often not until the time we as a board start discussing things and then a recommendation is actually put forward is then people start paying attention. You know, Wendy Troxell's presentation, which a lot of people showed up, but I'm sure maybe a lot of people who showed up to that presentation were people who were already interested or might have been leaning towards this to begin with, even though it was absolutely inundated within the community. So we would provide, if there is a recommendation for a change, we provide for the ample time for that communication.
Thank you.
And Susan, we can make some headway in that, because I noticed when I stood up that there were some people, nice gathering out in the hallway, and I invited them to come in so that you could get a head start in disseminating the information even further, but for some reason they wanted to stay out there. Maybe it was the coffee, I don't know. But also I wanted to add on to Mike's question, which was a very, very common question that I believe people ask is, people say, why would you do this for students now when they just have to learn how to get up earlier when they're adults and going to work? And what Dr. Troxell said is that
The reason why is because this is a time-limited biological phenomenon. This is something that occurs with the onset of adolescence when melatonin begins being released 2 hours later than it does in childhood, and 2 hours later when it does in adulthood. So that by the time you cycle through adolescence and have to go off to work, you're back to a circadian rhythm where it's much easier to get up early to go to work. She actually made the point that for people who make that, express that concern, she would offer that if you have a child who is getting ready to go to kindergarten in 2 years, at 3, they might need 2 or 3 naps a day according to their sleep needs. So you wouldn't say, well, I'm not going to nap my child as a 3-year-old because in 2 years my child's going to need to go to kindergarten and I've got to get my child, I don't want to baby my child when he or she has to go off to kindergarten. So that is a very common, Mike, I don't know how many people you're hearing it from, but apparently it's common enough that that was something that Wendy Droxel pulled right out of her hip pocket as one of the pieces of advice that she had to offer when she came to visit.
Tony and I have been talking about this for a long time, about how the science is very compelling, but when can we get to the meat of things? What do we have to trade off, and what is the price of that? And I don't mean money. I mean what do we have to do to make it happen? I see that as your next steps. I'm happy to see that. I hope we're not going to end up with a list of things to do without knowing what is the price, what is the cost. And for naysayers in this community, nothing will irritate them and get them here at every single meeting if we are not going into this with our eyes wide open and being honest and truthful about it. I understand people are very passionate about it. It makes total sense to me too. I get it. It's wonderful that we would even consider this option. It's very progressive. But I have to know what we're trading for it, and everyone has to know. So I encourage you to please get on to that step as soon as you can, and be honest, be open, and let us know what we're going to give up to achieve what we want.
I think that's kind of the exciting part about where we are in the process right now, and even our discussion yesterday in the meeting is like, okay, so what would this actually look like, and what are the nuts and bolts and details and things like that. And you know, quite frankly, that's the fun part of any issue like this. And as Tony said, we've had lively discussion, and it's been great. So yeah, we're excited for this step in the process as well, as I hope the committee is.
I look forward to it. Thank you.
I know I'm next. You know. I want to say I really appreciate, I know this has been a really long slog for a lot of the parents. I know this initiative has been going on from before Mr. Batchelor even got here. There were people interested in this project.
I've been here 10 years now.
So I want to just say I appreciate all the parents who have repeatedly shown up to meetings and come and talk to us and encourage the administrators and all the people in the community who volunteered and weren't asked to help. Because it's a lot of time and effort that goes into this. And I appreciate the people who volunteer their expertise. And I appreciate that despite the get off my lawners, we started with the, what we're going to respect the science behind this. I do think there are things that we will have to compromise. But realistically, and I've said this before, I went to private school in high school. I started at 8:30, and I don't think I missed that much. I played after school sports, I did theater, I did choir, I did all the extracurriculars. So if the private schools around here find a way to make it work, I think there's a way to make it. Now obviously there's a different scale, but I think that's something that we should be able to emulate and offer to our students. One thing that I would really appreciate just being available to us, I think it came up in public comment, but I noticed it. When we saw the technology study come before the curriculum committee, the underlying data to all the surveys was available to us in board docs, so I could actually go see, how many were some and how many answered, and I actually, believe it or not, took the time to go do that. Thank you. But it wasn't available for this, and I would actually really appreciate it. I'm sure the committee has seen it. I think it would be helpful to, even to some of the naysayers, to be able to see. I was really, I know the science, but I also assume Radnor parents are better than I am at getting their children to bed early. And it was really striking to me, the numbers and how much it's affecting our high school students. And I really feel strongly that we owe it to them as a community to be helping them with this issue.
Can I just make one comment in
Sure.
regards to that data that you're talking about?
Is it there and I just missed it?
No.
Okay.
It's going to be put. That's a great idea, and I'll put it up there. I want to make sure that you may have somewhat of a slightly different version. I'm not sure. There was one data piece in here about self-reporting, what time kids go to bed and what time they wake up. Do you have that in there? Or no, it was you got the okay. Because we did take out one piece of data from the survey because we found out after the fact, help of Jackie Kloss, who's been a great part to the committee. We realized that the way it was reporting out, the data might have not been as accurate as we had hoped for, so we took that piece out. So I wasn't sure if it was in yours or not, but so the number of average hours of sleep per child, it is in there.
Yeah.
So that is to be taken out. We found out like a good researcher, you go back and continue to analyze, and we found out that it was based on how it was
That had more to do with how the tool.
Tool, right, that's what I want to make sure it's clear.
And we want to make sure we go back and look at that.
So, please ignore that.
Yeah, that's okay. I would also say, I attended Dr. Trexel's lecture, and it was very, very impressive. Her credentials are very impressive, but also all the detail and the information that she was able to impart. So I would hope that as you're trying to educate the community and make sure you're reaching out, like Susan said, to people who may not even be focusing on this, that you make a link to that video available broadly to people who want to understand why it is we're even talking about this issue.
You know, it's not about the study. I keep forgetting to say this publicly. Even if we don't make, and we have an administrator from the high school, even if we don't make a recommendation, or regardless of what to try, finals could be later in the day.
So one of the things that we've talked about, well, thank you. One of the things that we have talked about is the committee has mentioned multiple times that, sort of with our no change option, the committee has come up with all of these different things that we can do to promote sleep hygiene with our students, and whether that's looking at homework again, whether it's looking at changing final times, whether it's talking about technology use, etc. So all of those things, we just had this discussion yesterday. The sort of no change things, they'll be proposed with every possible option, essentially.
Okay.
That was sort of
Thank you.
Yeah.
So I didn't, I guess it's my turn?
Yeah.
We're going in turns.
Yep.
Which I'm highly not used to. So the average hours, I didn't understand what you were saying about that line item.
The average hours of sleep, it's
self-reported says
self-reported 7 hours. That data is not reliable only because of the way it was exported into an Excel file. Because some students, not every student answered the time they go to bed and the time they wake up. So it left some blanks, so when it was filtered, it just matched up next to each other. It wasn't.
Okay.
So
somehow we're going to figure out, because that was my question.
Yeah.
The comment here in the technology section on the last item that 50% turn their devices off, I agree with you. I don't think they count their phone as a device. Yep. Especially if the question before it was about having a computer in your room.
And I think that goes
You're
back to the television as well.
I'm turning off a device, I'm turning off that. So I am interested in, did we collect the data in terms of what time they turn that device off?
We did not at this point.
Because
so
that's
that was a
really
good question.
essentially important, right? Because the blue screen and the studies that they've done around that, if my recollection is correct, it's roughly 90 minutes is what they tell you from the time you stop using a device that has blue screen until your brain is ready for sleep. So that is a huge key piece of information. Probably more important than the number of hours they sleep on average, because that's kind of a mushy number. This is an important number, and I don't know how we get it, but I think it's important. Because for me, I'm trying to keep my personal opinion out of this. I'm looking at it from a district, what's best for the district point of view. And I really appreciate Julia's comment about getting to the facts and really understanding very clearly what we are or aren't getting, no matter what option we go with, and what the implications or costs are. So I am interested, having chaperoned hundreds of kids now on many events for the last 4 years and watched what they do. I'm very interested to understand that question and whether we really think that the start time is really going to have them still turn the device off at the same time,
right,
or will it simply push that device time back by the hour or the half hour or whatever? Because unless we're reducing something out of their day, how are they really, why are they not just shifting their entire day by that half hour, 45 minutes, whatever we end up doing? I need that piece of information. Maybe there's studies about that. Maybe other school districts have already done it and can really provide data around that information, because for me, that's key to understanding it. The second piece that I'd be very interested to have you guys do, I did my own personal study, but I'd like to include in our knowledge of this particular issue, what happens in other school districts internationally. We know where we're ranked internationally, and I'd like you to do the report to understand what school times are and hours of the day the kids are in school in other countries that are outpacing us, quite frankly, in education. Well, I did a survey. I have a global company. I did my own personal survey, and I have many data points from around the world. And I can tell you that some are at 8 o'clock or 8:30, but many are way before that. And they have much longer days. Though they have a big break in the middle. A lot of school districts have, or a lot of school systems have a 2-hour break in the middle, but they go until 5:30, 6 o'clock at night, and that's not with extracurricular. So I would, as a data point to be, impartial, I would like if you guys can pull that together and provide us with that. And then the only other comment I had was around that Penn study. Appreciate that you're going to look at the traffic patterns, but as I said when Mike brought it up, the data from the Penn study was pre-King of Prussia.
No, that's good.
And all of the modifications that were made. So now if you actually dare to sit by Valley Forge Military Academy and watch the traffic flow that comes down out of King of Prussia now to avoid either King of Prussia Road or the Blue Route, they all come down from like where the Wegmans and all those new facilities are open, all through the all through that Valley Forge. That upper part of Radnor is a nightmare, coming and going. So I would encourage, if you're going to get a traffic study, we need to get a new one.
I'll try to keep this brief because I know we're over time. The devils are in the devil is in the details, both in terms of the data and in terms of, Julia, what you're talking about is an excellent point that you have to work out a lot of logistical details. But even going back to the concussion issue, I did a little bit of reading that article that Amy mentioned. So neck muscles in young women are not as strong generally as neck muscles in young men. So that was cited as a possible reason why there are more head injuries among girls soccer players than boys, for example. Another factor was that laws that have been implemented over the past 7-8 years that have increased not only the awareness of traumatic brain injury, but also the assessment protocols. So actually more concussions are being noticed. But generally speaking, with concussions, you have maybe 77 per 100,000 in football, 50 with hockey, and 30 with girls soccer. But with new data and new attention, new awareness in the public, things change. So the same can apply to school sleep times. The more that we understand about the brain, the more that we understand about the growing brain, the effect of blue light in our glowing rectangles. We all love them. I know I do. I have a heart. My wife tells me all the time, put that darn thing down before, stop reading the paper or whatever. So it's a challenge that we all face as a society. So it's for downs on for our kids. But the science is very clear, and honestly, I think that 10 o'clock would be ideal. It's not going to happen, right? Because we live in a society that is built for, or at least everyone's getting their workday going. To speak to Patty's discussion about international comparative, in Finland, for example,
They've been leading the PEARLs and TIMS and all these large-scale educational assessments for years. And they have very flexible schedules. They have a lot less homework. I mean, there's all kinds of differences in how school is conducted in other countries and other societies. And that tends to fit with other policies and the rhythms of work schedules of the parents. So there's a lot of things that we're pushing against here, but I think 8:30 is a great start. And I agree with one of the parents that said, we're a leading school district. We should be going in line with the trend, which is follow the science. And 8:30 is a more than reasonable. I just don't want anyone to think that 8:30 is some kind of outlandish time. It's not at all. Actually, 10 o'clock would be ideal if we're going along with, Wendy would say the same thing. But again, the science is evolving on this, but I think it's great that we're doing this. And again, it's very helpful that we have public pressure, that we have parents that are concerned, that are knowledgeable, that are pushing for this. This is great. It's a sign of a very healthy community that's looking out for our kids. So very positive. Thanks.
Well, I'd like to thank you all. It's a positive step forward. When I first got on the school board, which was over 22 years ago, this was a topic that we discussed over 20 years ago, and I'm sure they discussed it before that. I don't think the science was there. I don't think the parents were there. I don't think that the pressure was there. The United States had the capability of changing child labor laws in the best interest of the children. We have an opportunity to look at what we can do that's in the best interest of the children that we're charged with. So I would echo what Julia said here. We continue to put forward the honest effort that you're doing. Make sure we understand where we're going and the steps along the way and the benefits for this. So I applaud you for that and your whole team.
I don't want to repeat, excuse me, points that everyone else made. I think that we do need to pay attention to, obviously, the science of it, and nobody's refuting that. I was struck, though, by some things that I think we should also pay attention to, which is students reporting, the majority of the students reporting between 2 and 4 hours of homework a night. In addition to being in school all day, and then clubs after school and sports and other really interesting things that they should be doing, like interacting face-to-face with other people instead of sitting at home. So that kind of jumped out at me. And they also reported that they would definitely go to sleep earlier if they weren't burdened with all this homework. So it seems to me that we kind of have a no-brainer sitting right there, which is to work on, if we're giving homework, that it be really efficient and that kids would go to sleep if they weren't doing homework. So if they're doing it, I hope it's really productive and necessary homework. I mean, that just jumped right out at me, the homework piece.
Lydia, may I just say one quick thing?
Sure.
I completely agree, and there are a bunch of collateral things that need to be looked at and have a multi-pronged approach to solving this issue of chronic sleep deprivation. One of the things, though, that will help with homework, according to Wendy Troxel and the science, is that students who are well rested are more efficient. So they, hopefully, in conjunction with paying attention to how homework is assigned and what the requirements are, let's hope that if a change is made and students are more rested, we'll see that number come down regardless, because they'll be more efficient in getting it done.
So next steps, do you want to summarize what you're going to do from here?
So just our next steps are, we're going to continue with our committee work in regards to working out these scenarios and work towards developing a recommendation based off of what we come through with this.
And if I could recommend too, as we move forward, one of the things that Tony and Dave have done a nice job of doing, and will continue to do with this committee, is they've been posting information on the website. So there's a lot of research on the website.
The meeting
updates are on the website. So that'll continue. As the different options are looked at, because there's a lot of different options now for how would we run a bus schedule, those types of things. to have those shared with the public as well, because I think what was summed up very clearly here tonight is a reality that we need to work with it. That is, we get really excited by what we see from a lot of the research and all of that, but there is a reality to the obstacles, and the obstacles are different in every district. In every district, there's a different set of obstacles. And those obstacles will start to become more clear now in the next few meetings. And I think those are the pieces that we want to make sure that we are proactively sharing and looking at as we move forward. And I think the website could be a venue to do that as we move forward. I want to thank Tony and Dave for all their work, and thank the committee for all they've done. There have been a lot of other topics that have come up at these meetings that are important for us to look at as a district as well, that will come out of their final work. So thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, I also want to thank you, and please extend our appreciation to your committee members.
Yes, a number of them are here.
Worked
Just
very
raise your
hard.
hand.
Thank you for helping. All right. Is there any new business? That brings us to public comment. We're 45 minutes over our deadline, but we will take public comment since a lot of people came out tonight.
Hour and 15 minutes past our.
No, we're not.
We're supposed to be done by 6.
No, 6:30. Please come forward.
Nice try, Kim.
She's good.
I just have one. Show Sharma, Grange Road, Wayne, Pennsylvania. About impacts, the impact study. It can be done at age 11. I do believe that it should be done on all students. A baseline test is very important. 11 is not the best age to do it, even though it can be done. Middle school 11, maybe like the 7th graders is a good idea to do, more reliable. The other thing I just learned about was that a non-contact sport, I believe crew, girls crew team, has had maybe 4 or 5 concussions now. So I was really surprised and talking to a parent friend about how to help her daughter. So
They get their head carried as books.
it's crazy, catching a crab. I literally thought she was catching a crab. Didn't know that.
No.
Okay, thank you.
No.
More likely carrying those.
Is there any other public comment? We really do want to hear from people that came out and have something new to offer. Okay, seeing none. Our next meeting will be the 2nd Tuesday in June.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay, take a 5-minute break for policy.
Got it, yeah.